I always thought I lived in a boring place. A regular street, surrounded by houses that seemed built from the same mold, with neighbors who waved mechanically every morning. It was the kind of neighborhood where, if anything unusual happened, everyone would know within minutes. It was on a gray Monday, at the start of spring, that I saw him for the first time. He was leaning against the corner of my street, right in front of that convenience store that had closed years ago. An old flower cart, covered by a tattered tarp, occupied the cracked asphalt beside him. He wore a dark overcoat, far too long for his thin body, and a faded hat that barely hid his face. There was something wrong. I can't quite explain it. The flowers on the cart looked like the kind someone would leave on a grave, wilted, faded, some with fallen petals. And the man, standing there, made no effort to sell them. He just remained motionless, with a lost look, as if he were part of the scenery. I thought he might be some street artist trying to get attention. Maybe a new resident, who knows? But something inside me, maybe a silent intuition, whispered that it wasn't anything that simple. The strange thing was that morning, no one seemed to notice him. People rushed by. Cars turned the corner, but no one stopped to look, as if he were displaced from reality. I went on my way to work, trying to forget the scene. I tried to convince myself it was just a strange coincidence, but the unease kept throbbing in a corner of my mind. And as I would soon find out, that would not be the last time our paths would cross. In the following days, I started paying more attention to that corner. It was impossible not to notice. The flower seller simply never left. Rain or shine, even during the cold spring nights, he stayed there, motionless like a statue forgotten by time. His eyes, which on the first day seemed vacant, now caused me greater discomfort. It was as if, even from afar, he knew exactly who I was. I tried to casually bring it up with the neighbors, like someone who didn't want to raise suspicion. That guy selling flowers. Strange, right? I commented to Mrs. Marta, who always watered her plants in the morning. She frowned, confused. "What guy?" she asked, looking toward the corner. When I explained, she chuckled lightly, as if she thought I was imagining things. I started paying closer attention. The flowers on the cart never changed. The vendor didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't interact. No one seemed to buy anything, or even see him. Some nights when I came home late, I would see his figure standing under the streetlight, his elongated shadow blending with the surrounding trees. Sometimes, I thought he would subtly turn toward me as I passed by. Other times, I was sure it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. Even so, it became harder and harder to ignore the unease. And inside me, a doubt began to grow. Was he there because of me? Curiosity is a slow-acting poison. The more I tried to ignore the vendor, the more he occupied my thoughts. Until one day, without planning it, I made the decision that would change everything. I would approach him. It was a Friday afternoon. The sun was sinking behind the houses, and a cold wind swept through the nearly empty streets. I crossed the sidewalk slowly, trying to act as if I were just wandering aimlessly. But as I got closer, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier, as if the very air resisted my approach. He was there, exactly as in the previous days. The flower cart, pushed a little further forward, looked even more decayed up close. The flowers, now that I saw them up close, were almost dry, some reduced to brittle twigs. I stopped about 2 meters away from him. "Good afternoon," I ventured, my voice sounding weaker than I would have liked. The vendor slowly lifted his face. He said nothing. His eyes were a dull gray, like ancient glass, and an almost imperceptible smile appeared on his cracked lips. I looked at the cart, trying not to show the discomfort growing inside me. That's when I saw it. Among the dead flowers, an old black and white photograph, crumpled and faded by time. The image made my blood run cold. It was my street, my house, exactly as it looked decades ago, before I was even born. I instinctively took a step back. The vendor just kept staring at me, the smile now a little wider. And for a moment, I swear he winked at me. That night, sleeping was impossible. The image of the old photograph, mixed with the vendor's vacant stare, seemed etched onto the walls of my room. Every sound from the street made me hold my breath, waiting to hear footsteps, knocking, or that almost inaudible whisper that I couldn't tell if was real. The next day, driven both by fear and the need for answers, I went to the small town library. It wasn't much, a few dusty shelves, old newspapers, outdated school books. But sometimes forgotten places hold secrets that no one else remembers. I started digging through the local newspaper archives, the ones from decades ago, searching for anything related to my street. It took hours. But then, among yellowed pages and the musty smell of old paper, I found it. An article dated April 27, 1982, reported a brutal crime. A flower vendor, living on the very corner where the cart now rested, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Witnesses said they heard screams during the early morning hours. When the police arrived, they found only the overturned cart, flowers scattered across the ground, and bloodstains washed away by the rain. The body was never found. The case was closed months later, another unsolved mystery. My heart raced. The pieces started fitting together in a sickening way. The flower vendor no one noticed. The flowers that never changed. The photograph of my house, as if he knew that place. Suddenly, it all seemed clear. He had never left. And now, after all this time, it seemed he had finally chosen someone to notice his presence. After that discovery, living in my own house became a constant exercise in vigilance. Any movement on the street, any different shadow cast by the streetlights, made me run to the window. And that's how I started to notice something even more disturbing. The flower vendor was no longer standing on the corner. Each new day, he seemed to have gotten a little closer to my house. First, he was a few meters ahead of the original spot. Then, beside Mr. Miller's abandoned house. A week later, directly on the sidewalk in front of my gate, and he never walked, never moved in front of me. It was as if, from one day to the next, he was simply closer. The nights became endless. I would wake up with the feeling of being watched, even locked inside my room. More than once, I swear I heard light footsteps outside, accompanied by a faint rustling, like dry flowers being dragged by the wind. On the last night, the nightmare reached its peak. I woke up around 3 in the morning to a rhythmic tapping against my front door, soft, insistent. I got out of bed with my heart pounding like a drum. As carefully as I could, I peeked through the living room window, and there he was. Standing on my porch, the flower cart abandoned a few steps behind him. He wasn't knocking with his hands. Instead, he dragged a small dry branch, tapping it against the wood of the door, like someone trying to get the attention of an old acquaintance. I didn't wait to see more. I locked every door and hid in the back of the house, praying for the night to pass and for the sun to rise quickly. When daylight finally came, I mustered the courage to step outside. The flower vendor was gone. The cart too. But on the porch, there rested a horrible bouquet of dead flowers, tied with an old, dirty ribbon. Attached to the bouquet was a torn piece of photograph, the same old portrait, with my house featured prominently. Only now, a small figure had appeared in the image, standing exactly where I remembered seeing the vendor. It was me, watched all along even without knowing it. I moved to a different city a few days later. Today, in a new neighborhood surrounded by strangers, sometimes I still smell the bitter scent of dead flowers invading my room at night, and whenever I smell it, I know he has found me again. I live in a neighborhood that many would describe as bland, the kind where the houses look so alike that sometimes even the residents get confused. Aligned streets, well-kept gardens, few children playing on the sidewalks. It was the kind of place where nothing strange was supposed to happen. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that I noticed it for the first time. I was coming home after a tiring day at work. As I crossed the street before mine, I spotted a small figure standing on the corner. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, holding a red balloon. He stood motionless, the balloon swaying gently in the breeze. At first, I didn't think it was strange. Just a neighborhood kid playing, I figured. But there was something about that scene that bothered me. The boy wasn't looking at anyone. He stood with his head down, arms stretched out holding the balloon string. He didn't move even when cars passed by, or when an elderly woman crossed the street right next to him without so much as a glance. I drove by, casting one last look through the rearview mirror. He was still there, standing still. When I got home, I tried not to think about it anymore. Maybe it was just some prank or a tradition I didn't know about. But deep down, an unsettling feeling had taken hold. That presence was wrong. And somehow, in a way I didn't yet understand, that boy didn't seem to belong to that place. In the following days, I began paying closer attention to the boy. Every time I came home from work, there he was, at the same corner, in the exact same spot on the sidewalk, holding the same red balloon. What really started to bother me was noticing the times he appeared. It wasn't just in the late afternoon. One night, when I got home later than usual, around 11, I saw his silhouette under the dim streetlight. Another time, on a Sunday morning, under a light drizzle, he was still there, the balloon soaked but still floating upright. I never saw anyone with him, no adults, no other children around. And the most disturbing thing, no one seemed to notice him. I stopped mentioning it to people. When I casually brought it up to a neighbor at the grocery store, he just laughed and said I was probably confusing it with some birthday decoration, but I knew better. The boy didn't move. He didn't speak. He just existed there, like a red stain on a gray canvas. From then on, I started changing my route home, trying to avoid him. But every time I let my guard down, catching a glimpse from the corner of my eye, he was there, unchanging. And little by little, fear began to creep into my nights. On Saturday afternoon, I gave in to what had been gnawing at me inside. The need to understand who, or what, that boy was. The sun was beginning to set as I turned down the street, determined. There he was. The red balloon contrasted against the golden sky, floating as if it were tied to the very void. My steps were steady, but inside me, nervousness grew like a fever. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. The boy, who had always kept his head down until then, slowly raised his face. He didn't seem scared or surprised. The expression was empty. His eyes, dark and sunken, didn't seem to reflect any light. His skin, pale like wax, had something wrong about it, as if time had stopped for him. I stood just a few meters away. I wanted to ask if he was lost, if he needed help. But my voice simply failed me. That's when it happened. Without warning, the red balloon popped. Not like a normal balloon tearing, it was a dry metallic snap. The boy didn't flinch. He simply disappeared. In the blink of an eye, where a child once stood, there was only the cold, empty street. I stood there frozen, not understanding, my heart pounding in panic. After that day, the life I once knew began to quietly fall apart. On the first night, I woke up without knowing why, drenched in cold sweat, with the feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. I slowly turned my head, and in the darkest corner of the room, I caught a glimpse of a small, motionless figure, a boy holding a red balloon. Blinking, the image would vanish. But the terror remained. The following nights were even worse. I dreamed of light footsteps running through the hallway, of the slight pressure of a small hand touching my bedroom doorknob. And always, I saw the red balloon, floating over my bed like a silent warning. During the day, I tried to act normal, but a sudden movement or an out-of-place shadow was enough to freeze my entire body. I knew it wasn't just imagination. He had crossed some invisible line, and now he was inside my life. I decided I had to leave. There was no point in trying to ignore it or trying to understand. My instincts told me, run. On the night of the move, while I was loading the last boxes into the car, the air felt heavier. An oppressive silence covered the neighborhood. No dogs barking, no lights in the neighboring houses. Just me, the empty street, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. That's when I looked to the end of the street, and my body froze. There, under the dead glow of the streetlight, was the boy with the red balloon. But he wasn't alone. Several others emerged from the shadows behind him, children, teenagers, all holding their own red balloons. None of them moved. None of the balloons fluttered, despite the strong wind blowing. I didn't think twice. I dropped everything and got into the car, speeding away as fast as I could, without looking back. Today, in a new city, I try to move on. But sometimes, in shop window reflections or in the corner of my eye, I see the red floating. Always distant, always silent. And I know that one day, when I least expect it, they'll be waiting for me again. It was a morning like any other. The overcast sky painted the street in shades of gray, and I was still struggling to truly wake up when I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door without much expectation. On the doorstep stood a tall delivery man in a generic uniform, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. His face seemed strange to me, not because of any visible deformity, but because of the way he smiled. Too wide, too expressionless. "Delivery for you," he said, mentioning my full name. A detail that made my insides freeze. I wasn't expecting anything. I hadn't ordered anything or asked for food. Still, I accepted the package out of reflex, just to end that uncomfortable situation quickly. I signed a paper he handed me, but I noticed he didn't even look at the signature. He just stared at me for a few seconds, the frozen smile on his face, before turning and disappearing down the street. No car, no bike, just walking. I closed the door, the package feeling strangely heavy in my hands. No sender label. No courier identification. Nothing. Curious and uneasy, I tore open the paper. Inside, I found something simple but disturbing. An exact replica of a toy car I used to have as a child, a model I had never mentioned to anyone. It couldn't be a coincidence. And in that instant, an unsettling feeling took over me. Someone knew more about me than they should. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of mistake. Maybe someone had sent it as a prank or a poorly addressed gift. But that illusion didn't last long. 2 days later, the doorbell rang again. The same delivery man. The same strange smile. Another package. This time, inside was an old book. The very first novel I had bought with my own money back in my teenage years. A worn-out copy, with my name scribbled on the back cover. My book, missing for over 10 years. At this point, discomfort turned into fear. Who knew about these things? How had they found such intimate objects, buried so deep in my past? In the days that followed, the packages kept arriving, always delivered by that same man. With each delivery, the objects seemed to dig deeper into my memories. A t-shirt from a team I used to like as a child, a movie ticket from the first film I ever saw alone, even an old family photo, a photo I was sure I had burned years ago. I tried not to open the door anymore. But somehow, the packages still appeared on the doorstep, as if he knew exactly where and when to find me. And with each new package, I felt that the distance between us was getting smaller. I decided I couldn't run anymore. At the next delivery, I would wait outside. I had to confront him, understand who was behind all this. On Saturday morning, I woke up early. I waited by the window, watching every movement on the street. And right at 9 o'clock, there he was, the delivery man, appearing on foot down the empty street, as if emerging from the shadows. This time, before he could ring the bell, I opened the door. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice wavering between fear and anger. He extended the package as usual. His smile, unchanged, seemed even colder up close. "You asked for it," he said simply. I stood still for a moment. I didn't ask for anything. I snapped, trying to keep control. He tilted his head slightly, like someone observing a curious animal. Without saying another word, he turned and started walking down the street, vanishing without hurry, without looking back. I stood there frozen, the package heavy in my hands, my heart pounding erratically. I opened it right there. Inside, there was something different this time. A piece of paper with only one handwritten sentence: "See you soon." And in that instant, I knew this was far from over. After that morning, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. In every window, in every reflection, it seemed there were invisible eyes following me. I turned the whole house upside down. I checked behind the pictures, under the furniture, even inside the light fixtures. I searched for hidden cameras, microphones, any sign of intrusion, but I found nothing. Still, the evidence was everywhere. I started receiving anonymous messages on my phone. Short, direct. "Did you enjoy your coffee today? Nice blue shirt. Please don't close the curtains." Messages that described, in detail, things I had just done. Things only someone watching me in real time could know. I tried to report it, change my phone number, even considered changing the locks. But the feeling was always the same. It was useless. He was already inside my life, and he knew everything about me. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I found the last package. This time, there was no doorbell. No knock on the door. The box was simply there, leaning against the doorstep as if it had sprouted from the ground itself. The brown paper was soaked by the rain, but the name, my name, still stood out, written by hand in crooked letters. With trembling hands, I brought the package inside. It took me a while to gather enough courage to open it. Inside, there was only one thing: a photograph. In the image, I was sleeping in my bed, my face partially hidden under the covers. The photo seemed to have been taken from a corner of the room, from an angle impossible to reach without entering the house. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind me, partially hidden in the shadows, was him, the delivery man. Standing still, smiling, his eyes locked on the camera. I dropped the photo to the floor as if it burned my skin. That same night, without even finishing packing my things, I got in the car and left. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. But deep down, I knew the truth. It didn't matter where I went. He knew where to find me. And he was just getting started.